I'm Liz Hirschnell-Talley, and welcome to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast. And the purpose of this podcast is to actually get to meet elected leaders who are interesting, wonderful, special, but at the end of the day, just really good people doing hard work. And so many times people will say, oh, he's just a politician or just a cutout figure with a stump speech. And what I am trying to do is dispel that myth, because there are a lot of amazing leaders. And today we have a very special person. And when I was thinking about setting this up to introduce him, I did a little research. And one of the things that I learned is that his grandfather in 1974 created the chicken tender. Now, for mothers, fathers, caretakers, children, people out there in the world, pretty much everybody, the chicken tender is pretty much one of the greatest things that ever came to be. I raised 5 kids, and I don't know what I would have done without the chicken tender. So I don't mean to keep going on about chicken tenders, but this is one of the greatest things that worked for me. And I am sure it actually has some really interesting value, and you can share with us in a moment what it was like to grow up in a family in a restaurant business. But just briefly, I would like to say you are the congressman from New Hampshire's 1st District.
You got it.
And that is southern New Hampshire and the eastern portions of the state. So that's Manchester City, Merrimack, Grafton, Belknap counties, Stratford, Carroll counties, Rockingham County, and you have the sea, the coast, and you're both urban and rural.
That's right.
So you're just kind of a very interesting...
It's a fascinating district, and everyone loves their district. I've lived my entire life in my district, so it feels like home. You know, DC will never feel like home to me, but New Hampshire's where I'm from, and I think, you know, being so grounded in the communities of my district, means that I want to go to the map to fight for the 75 cities and towns that I represent.
A lot, yeah. I just said a few, and you were 22 when you were first elected to the New Hampshire State Representative. You are also, which I think is important to share, which is that you are the first openly gay member of Congress from New Hampshire. And I always think it's important to talk about firsts, because then there's other people that can follow, and it's easier for them because you are a trailblazer in that way. So thank you, welcome, and yes, and the other thing I've learned about electeds is that their district is always the best district, their state is the best state, and really what it says is that we take pride in our community. That's a special part of this process.
Absolutely. Well, and I think community is so important at a time like this, where we do feel divided as a country along political lines and so many other lines. People want to get back to that sense of, being able to come together at the local level on up to the federal level and solve problems. Yeah. And really, that's what this enterprise is all about. I think people increasingly have a different view of politics. They see it as a way to own the other side, or to, just perform in a political sense. But when you get back to basics, it's about helping people. It's about making our community stronger and better. And that's why when you have a strong tie to the place that you represent, it is personal for you, because it's about the people, And that's what I think about each and every day.
And it's a huge time commitment. It's really giving up so much in order to serve. And yes, you love but then you do need to spend a lot of time in DC. So there's a lot of balance. And I don't think people always understand really what a dedication it takes to do the work you do.
There's certainly a lot of sacrifice all around from everyone who's here. And I think what just encourages me every day, even when we have tough votes, even when things feel like we're not going to be able to come together and find the right solution, there are good people on both sides of the aisle. And so I applaud you for getting to know people, what makes them tick, where they come from, and what motivates them to do this. Because I think understanding why we're here and what we're trying to reflect is really important to try to get to solutions.
I agree. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning of Chris' time. You live in Manchester, New Hampshire. Your family's Greek American, and your relatives, when they came here, started in the food business. They had an ice cream store that then turned into a restaurant.
Yeah.
And did you work in this restaurant? And what was it like to grow up in a Greek American family? Tell us a little bit about childhood in how it was for you.
Yeah, my family has deep New Hampshire roots. My mom is English on her side, and I go back several generations on her side in terms of New Hampshire roots. But on my dad's side, they came over from Greece in the early part of the 1900s. And like most Greek Americans, when they arrived, they figured out, how do we create a future for our descendants and focus on education and how we can get involved in the community. And the way that they decided to do that was by opening up a business. And they didn't speak much English. Somehow they got a local banker to take a chance on them. They opened a small candy store and an ice cream shop in 1917 in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. And it's grown into one of the largest independent restaurants in our state, and just a place that's a touchstone for a lot of folks in New Hampshire. And so just kind of coming from that experience, growing up in the restaurant business, working there since I was 13, bussing tables, washing dishes.
All the fun jobs.
All
they
that
gave you all the glamorous jobs to start.
And even, out of college, made the choice to come back to New Hampshire to get involved in the business in terms of co-owning and managing the business. And thankfully, I had a forgiving family that allowed me to get involved in public service on the side, which in New Hampshire is a very part-time enterprise. If you're serving in the legislature, It's not a full-time commitment. So I was able to balance that for the better part of 15 years before I decided to run for Congress. But really, my origin story is a family business that it's taught me about everything about, what it means to serve other people, to be connected to the community, and to look out for those that you work with and that you meet each and every day.
And just to be clear, you still do sell chicken tenders?
Oh, we do. Yeah.
Okay,
we're still open.
Sure. You understand the value of chicken tenders. In high school, did you have special teachers, somebody that inspired you, that even got you to think beyond perhaps like working in the restaurant business, that maybe got you to think about becoming a public servant or getting more involved?
I loved school. And I love math, I love science, English. I mean, everything I took, I was into it, and had incredible teachers in my public high school in New Hampshire, which you think of New Hampshire, you might have a certain sense of what it is, but this is an inner city school in Manchester, New Hampshire, one of the largest public high schools, and actually the oldest public high school in the state that I went to. I had teachers that had my parents in class, really committed to their profession. And without naming individuals, there were just a number that were really made a big impression on me and helped me see how you can sort of attain a space in the community and make a difference beyond just what you're doing professionally. There are people who give back, who, to this day support my runs for public office and are there for me in a lot of different ways. So, I really wouldn't be where I am today without my public school education and a lot of the teachers that I had on up through high school.
What's the best thing, one or two best things about New Hampshire? Because it is a small state. I can't really ask that of a lot of folks because they come from states where there's multiple.
Sure.
But you're really one of two. And what makes New Hampshire? I know you're the granite state. What is special about?
It's a state where people are fiercely independent. And certainly people have their political allegiances. Right. They're from different corners of the state. But it's this sense that, you want to allow individuals to do what they do, to have the respect of their neighbors and friends. And that when individuals are empowered and are strong, the community as a whole wins. And so I think that there's that sense that, of trying to do what's best for the state first, as opposed to, what's necessarily best for a political party. I think also just the size of New Hampshire lends itself to people being able to know one another and to come together around solutions. We've got a state legislature right now that's almost evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats.
And do they get things done?
And they get things done. Yeah. They pass the state budget on a bipartisan basis. They're working incredibly well together. It's a lesson for us here in Washington, where we also have close numbers, but we're moving in a different direction where it's just chaotic all the time. So I think it's that level of just proximity to one another, where once you know each other first, it's a lot harder to...
That's why we do these videos. That's what this podcast is about. Like, if people get to know folks, and again, whatever side, it changes the dimensions and it changes the communication. And I think people also drop their guard and are willing to be much more mutual and to communicate better.
And so we've got a citizen legislature, as I mentioned, unprofessional, not paid really, legislature of great volunteers who are community members who step up and run for office. We've got this New Hampshire primary, which is still going, despite what the DNC is trying to do, and allows us to bring candidates for the presidency into our living rooms, into our coffee shops, and have really impactful conversations about what's on people's minds that wouldn't happen in bigger states. So I think it's this kind of way of life that we have where, we can come together in the town square and despite our differences, figure out a way forward. And that's kind of the hallmark of our state. Something I'm really proud of.
I like it. And you're married.
Yes.
And you recently got married this year?
In February.
And how is it for your husband in terms of like your travel? Because you're gone a lot and he has to carry the weight of like staying home and doing what needs to get done at home.
Yeah. Well, thankfully I've got kind of the best of both worlds. His schedule's pretty flexible.
Okay.
He's got a lot of remote time. And so to a large extent, we're traveling back and forth between our home in New Hampshire
Well, so
and
people
our
travel as
apartment
well.
in DC. And so while a lot of members will come to DC, leave their families behind, a lot of weeks, we're together, and it just is a great support system for me. But we got married in February on what was probably one of the coldest days in the last 100 years in New Hampshire. It didn't get above zero the day we got married, but we're surrounded by family and friends.
So you had a lot of warmth that way.
Yeah. And we were all kind of trapped in this hotel together, and just had a great time. It was a good beginning
amazing.
To our lives together.
Again, we're not here about politics, but you have made one of the things that you're most passionate about is the opioid crisis. And it isn't a partisan issue because there's not a family in America, it doesn't matter what religion, what political party, whatever, that doesn't know somebody or have somebody that has suffered from opioids or drugs. And what is it that got you to understand that this is something worth fighting for and that you are passionate about?
Well, it's been evident for more than 10 years that we've had an opioid epidemic in this country, and families and individuals that have always struggled with addiction. That's always been there. But the drugs are so much more powerful now. A few grains of fentanyl or a synthetic opioid can kill an individual. And a lot of times people don't know what they're taking. I've lost high school classmates. I've lost employees at my small business. I meet too many people out there across my district that are just so pained, and they feel like they've done everything they know how to try to save their family members, to try to get them into treatment and support their recovery. But sometimes it's just not enough. And I've been heartened by the fact that there's a good bipartisan group that understands the impact of these issues, is working together hand in hand. And we continue to put more resources on the table, but it's a supply and demand issue. It's both going after the substances that are being trafficked, but also making sure that we're compassionate and providing people the care that they need at the right time. And in a state like mine, it's been tough to build up those supports. Those weren't there, 10 years ago when we started seeing our communities flooded with these opioids. But we're making some progress. But we know that when an individual's in recovery, they're there for the rest of their life. So it's something we've got to sustain over time.
Yeah, and try to figure out how to prevent it from starting, which is also an interest. Well, thank you for that, because it has touched my life. It has touched everybody I know's lives. It is something that is really, people don't necessarily want to talk about it either. It's kind of like sometimes just on the hush, but I think that you being an advocate and you also making it clear that not only in New Hampshire, but throughout our country, it's a crisis that needs to be. And I like that you're talking about working with people across the aisle that also are really concerned about this issue.
I find that young people are really much more open to having the conversation around addiction and mental health, as we need to destigmatize behavioral health issues. Young people are really helping to lead the way. I think they're identifying these issues among their peers.
Right.
They're speaking out, and we've got to give them the support they need to lead on this.
What is the best advice you've ever received, and maybe the worst advice you've ever received?
Interestingly, I believe when I was back in college, I sort of thought I was on a path and that I would eventually go to law school and then, either practice law or maybe even pursue public service at some point in time. But one of my professors in college essentially dispelled that notion that I had to, take that next step and go to law school in order to, have some kind of a career. And I'm glad I didn't do that. I thought that was sound advice. He said, if you didn't want to practice law, don't go to law school. And for me, I wanted to go back home and get involved in my community in a lot of different ways, including at my small business. And that was probably the best advice, I could think of at the time. No regrets. And the best decision I made was going back to a community that gave me so many opportunities in life and looking for ways to give back.
Okay, so now we're going to do like rapid questions.
Okay.
And they're all pretty easy, but you can answer, not answer. And if you want just one word or if you want a little explanation. What is your favorite sound?
Well, that's challenging. Some people, they're so dialed into their devices. They may say like, the buzz of their phone when they get a text message or something.
It's okay.
You kind of something on that. Let me think about that.
Yeah, think about it. I was doing it. Okay. Yeah. Favorite color?
Blue or green?
Okay.
Yeah.
This is going to be a tough one. Favorite smell? Because you're in the restaurant world, so maybe.
Well, the fried chicken.
Okay.
I have to say that.
Who is your biggest cheerleader?
My parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love me unconditionally, have supported me every step of the way. And they're just terrific people. My mom was a high school math teacher and then left that profession to be at home with my sister and me when we were growing up. And now she works at the restaurant with my dad and doing all the books. My dad's the hardest working person you'll ever meet. His idea of a slow week is, 65, 70 hours. And his idea of retirement is slowed down to like 40 hours a week.
Right.
So
they're
they're
never really retiring.
Yeah. Always keeping the motor running. But they're amazing people and are just there for whatever I need. Beautiful. And like I'll be out at events in, random towns in New Hampshire. And sometimes they'll show up, unexpectedly just to be there supporting me. They're great.
That's great. What is your zodiac sign?
Gemini.
And are you a Gemini?
I had to think about that.
Yeah, but are you in character a Gemini?
I don't really know much about astrology.
Okay, well, I'm sure after
maybe you could tell me a little bit more.
No, we don't have time for that, but I'm sure after this, people are going to text you and tell you that you are or you aren't a Gemini, and they're going to give you more information. So
is that like a split personality? Is that what that means?
I think there is something about having two personalities there. Yeah. I look forward to figuring that one out. This is a funny one because I'm pretty sure your answer. No. If you were on a desert island and there was one food that you would want to eat, what would it be? Don't say chicken tender.
My fallback might have been ice cream.
Yeah.
But I think that wouldn't really
make
it
a
on
meal.
A desert island.
Yeah, that's true.
Cereal.
Cereal.
I could eat cereal every meal.
What's your favorite cereal?
Oh, it's hard to say. I like granolas. I like basic things like Honey Nut Cheerios. Okay. Yeah, I really like all cereal. So that's how I start every day. Okay.
And what's your favorite music?
We were just talking about this actually. And I listen to a lot of oldies. For some reason, I grew up listening to 60s and 70s music, playing my parents' old Beatles records, which I still have and play today. So that kind of feels like my musical home. Like so when I'm listening to the radio, I listen to 60s and 70s music usually.
Favorite household chore?
I like sweeping and vacuuming, washing the windows, doing the dishes. I guess I like a lot of chores.
Yeah. That's a good one. You're a keeper. Everyone has a superpower. What's your superpower besides sweeping and windows?
I don't know. This isn't really a superpower, but I would say coming from the hospitality business, you really work to understand where people are coming from and how to meet their needs and provide them with a great experience or good service. And so I think coming out of that experience, you sort of are sensitive to what makes people tick and either how to work together with people in certain circumstances, what they need to get to yes, or just sort of where they're coming from. So I think it's a little bit of an awareness about beautiful. What people are about, where they're coming from,
and recognize them for what they need or what they're asking for, which is important. Where in the world have you dreamed to travel, not for work, but for pleasure, with you and your husband, that you have not gone to? What would be your top of your list?
Well, I've never been to most of the islands in Greece, so I think we definitely need to get over there and do that. There's not a lot of time to travel, by the way, when you're in Congress. So, most of the time you're running as quickly as you can to the airport in Washington to get back home for a lot of events. And, you spend the weekend crisscrossing the district, and I've enjoyed doing that. But if we can fit in Greece
island sounds amazing. Next summer.
Over the next couple of years, maybe not next year, but maybe. I find the odd numbered years are a little bit easier for travel than the even numbered years when you're in a campaign cycle.
I understand that. I was doing a little bit of research and I found out that J.D. Salinger lived most of his life in New Hampshire. And, Catcher in the Rye was one of my favorite books, one of my kids' favorite books. There's one line in it which is very famous. Mm-hmm. And it kind of made me think of you. And I'm just going to read it and then I'll explain why. He says, what I have to do, I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff. I mean, if they're running and they don't know where they're going, I have to come out from somewhere and catch them. That's all I'll do all day. I'd just be the catcher in the rye and all. And he was talking about like helping people that to grow up. And but I take it even further because the way I look at the work you've done, and I didn't really talk to you before today, I knew about you, is sort of like helping people, making sure they don't fall, making sure they can get to the next place. And part of it is just what you do in New Hampshire, but as a leader, but again, it goes back to the people that are in crisis, that are in the opioid crisis. What do you think of that? And I think that's an important thing for people to understand is like, there is this special role that you're playing, which is to make sure that people don't fall down, don't fall off, and they get to the next place.
I think the best days as a member of Congress are the ones where you're not necessarily taking a vote or making a headline, but it's about how you're helping one individual that reaches out to you and needs assistance. Yeah. And so we really put a focus on what we do back in New Hampshire as much as anything else in the constituent services that we provide. Interestingly, the location for our kind of headquarters in Manchester, which is our district office, was the footprint of the first location of the restaurant that my great-grandparents opened when they came from Greece. So in some ways, we're going full circle there. You know, to me, that's what it's all about. It's about helping others. And by the way, the point in time where I was elected to Congress in 2018, you know, we saw a government shutdown. We had this pandemic, all sorts of other challenges that have come up through the years. There have been so many ways where you've had to be there for your constituents that I could never have imagined when I first ran for this office. And you couldn't do this without an amazing team behind you. And so we've got a lot of really committed people that also kind of share that worldview about, you know, what this role is really about, where you can add value.
So if you're having a rough day, and there's rough days, like what do you do? Do you have like a process that gets you sort of through it? Do you go out? Do you take exercise? Do you meditate? Like, what do you do when like it just feels like the world is tough?
Sometimes I'll go for a run. Okay. I try to run most days. Usually I try to start off the day doing that, but I think there were a couple days last week where things were really up in the air, and just kind of getting out of the office and going for a run allowed myself to like, you know, see what really mattered here and help focus my attention. So that's something that really restores me, but also kind of focuses me on what's coming up.
Okay, so now we play this little game called Kiss, Marry, Trash.
Oh, wow.
It's got other names, but it's basically a rating. And I'll give you 3 things, and you'll say what you would like to kiss, what you would like to marry, what you would trash. Mm-hmm. They're easy, but you can you can take a 5th if you want. The first one is Netflix, reading, meditating.
Well, I think probably in that order. You know, I do so much reading through work that
you can't make
sometimes I can't always find time for the fun reading that you want to do. So definitely like unwinding with some Netflix or whatever is on.
Whatever's streaming there.
And also, you know, ideally, I'd have a good book by the bedside table. Yeah. What was the third?
Meditating.
Yeah.
So
what's that?
Remember, I know. Okay. Is. Meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And I will just throw out there that I also learned that New Hampshire's maple industry produces almost 90,000 gallons of maple sugar. So I think you got to get breakfast in there, just pointing out.
Yeah. And you know, there's a caucus for everything in Congress. Yeah. Groups of people that care about something. There was no maple caucus when I came. So I started the maple caucus.
Yes, I would say so, considering how many gallons.
We've got a lot of maple producers. Yeah. And by the way, you know, if you're ever wondering about climate change and whether or not people are seeing it, talk to the maple producers, because their season changes every year. It gets later in terms of when they tap, and, you know, smaller in terms of the volume of syrup that they're producing. So that's just a side note, but breakfast definitely the favorite.
Breakfast the favorite.
And again, probably cereal, but pancakes are great too.
Yeah.
And I guess lunch be number 2. Okay. I like sandwiches.
Okay. And if you're running or if you're listening to music, what would you rate? Pop music, country, or hip hop? You already kind of said this, the Beatles. So
yeah. I'd pop definitely first. You know, there's some hip hop songs that I've got in my Spotify
probably good for running.
That will come up every now and then. Yeah, that keep you motivated, but definitely not country.
Okay.
I don't know.
Not a fan. Country fans will just say
sorry.
That. Yeah, New Hampshire. If you're going to watch a movie, would it be drama, rom-com, or thriller?
Boy, probably thriller first. Yeah, I like fast-paced movies. You know, things that'll kind of scare you a little bit. Yeah. Keep you on the edge of your seat. Rom-com probably, I'd probably dump that or whatever the euphemism is. And what was the other genre?
Thriller, rom-com, drama.
Drama? Yeah, there's some good dramas.
Okay. If you're going to have pasta, this is a very tough one.
Yeah.
Spaghetti, penne, or fusilli?
Spaghetti's a lot of work. I think I would dump spaghetti.
Okay.
But I think fusilli I like because it kind of picks up some of the sauce, right?
Okay.
That's the corkscrew.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so that would be my number one.
What kind of sauce is your favorite?
I like red sauces.
Okay.
Like a meat sauce is good.
Okay. Just confirming. The last one, and yours is interesting because of where you live. Seasons: summer, fall, winter.
Fall's the best. Fall in New Hampshire,
Gorgeous.
there's just a feeling in the air that is so different, and we're at peak foliage right now, which is always a lot of fun. We've got great apple orchards, places where you can go experience that. So fall's good. I'd say winter's number two. I love the snow. I don't get out skiing nearly enough, but and summer's
But you
great
have good
too.
skiing
Yeah. We've got great skiing.
Okay, so this is our last part.
Okay.
And I asked each leader the same question, and I've heard beautiful things from everybody and different. The last question is about joy. How do you define joy? What brings you joy? And then how through your joy do you share that with others?
Well, there's not a lot of joy in Washington, D.C. most days. I don't know. Most people are just kind of trudging through the hallways and are so stressed, running from one thing to the next. But I think just to go back to what I was reflecting on before, I think the joy in this job is helping others and being of use to other people.
Yes.
And so that's where I kind of derive my joy, and I would hope most of my colleagues feel the same way. And I think that you can put up with a lot of stuff when you can find some of those moments where you're able to break through and make a difference. So that's what keeps me going. And I think there is some joy that results as part of that sustains you for the long journey ahead.
Yeah. And personally, what brings you joy when you're not trudging through the Capitol?
I think it's just the moments where I'm able to be with family. We've got a great close-knit family in New Hampshire, and to be able to bring my now husband into the fold and to incorporate him as part of that family is pretty amazing, especially if you kind of think about, where we've come on issues around equality. If you asked me as a high school kid in the 1990s whether or not I'd even be able to come out to find love myself and fulfillment in a relationship, and then to have that person accepted by my family, who was totally wonderful, by the way, and they were going to be there for me no matter what. But there's no way I could have imagined where I'd be just a few short years later. That brings me a lot of happiness, and to see our relationship supported is just really validating, because I think anyone, as they kind of grapple with who they are, it's a struggle, and it, a lot of times, you aren't proud of yourself and what you feel deep down inside, and to be able to have that validated by your family and people close to you that just adore is pretty amazing.
That's touching. I mean, I get what you're saying, and thank you for sharing it. And really, thank you for coming here and sharing who you are, because I think that, you talk about New Hampshire, and the folks there are authentic and they're real and they believe in their values. And you exemplify that as a leader, and many leaders will push that aside because they have to do something else. But I think that the fact that you can bring that into the work you do not only honors the people of New Hampshire, but it also honors our country. It honors people that are in a position of wondering if they can be themselves and when they can be themselves. And I just thank you for being honest and sharing, and for giving us a little insight on more than chicken tenders, but really the beauty of New Hampshire and the importance of the work you do to help people.
Come visit us anytime.
Oh, I am.
There's some chicken tenders for you. If
Chicken
you make the trip
tenders and
up,
maple syrup.
Yeah.
And I look forward, and I actually look forward to coming at a time when the leaves are falling, and it's just beautiful. So thank you for being here, and thank you for the work you do.
Thanks, Liz.
Hi, it's Liz. Please join me every Tuesday for coffee to talk about heart and humanity with our elected leaders. Ciao.